Good morning. It's Saturday, November 15th. Today, after days of silence, Donald Trump finally responds to reporters' questions about Jeffrey Epstein, including the newly released emails, his order to investigate Democratic ties to Epstein, and whether he's considering a pardon for convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell.
Plus, Trump is once again downplaying the affordability problem in America, dismissing the word affordability as nothing more than a Democratic catchphrase. Both Maryland Governor Wes Moore and House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries will join us to push back on that and much more this morning.
In my exclusive interview with JFK's grandson, Jack Schlossberg, who's running for Congress, he shared his thoughts on why Democratic victory in next year's midterms is so critical, and he didn't mince words about his cousin RFK Jr. So grab your coffee, settle in, and welcome to the weekend on MS Now.
Welcome to the weekend, and thanks for joining us on MS Now. Let me say that again. Thanks for joining us on MS Now. I'm Jonathan Capehart, along with Jackie Alamany and Eugene Daniels. Don't adjust your settings. We are formerly MSNBC. As of this moment, we have a new name, MS Now, which stands for My Source for News, Opinion, and the World. But other than that, and these snazzy new graphics, not much is changing. Bottom line, same mission, new name. And with that, let's get right to our top story. President Donald Trump is throwing everything he can at the White House walls, figuratively, of course, to try to get something to stick in his ongoing attempt to deflect from the Jeffrey Epstein saga, especially following the newly released trove of emails from the notorious child sex trafficker that includes a number of references to Trump and suggests Trump knew more about Epstein's abhorrent actions with underage girls. And after avoiding reporters' questions for the last few days, Trump finally responded last night on Air Force One.
What did Jeffrey Epstein mean in his emails when he said you knew about the girls?
I know nothing about that. They would have announced that a long time ago. Jeffrey Epstein and I had a very bad relationship for many years. But he also saw a strike because I was president. So he dictated a couple of memos to himself. Give me a break.
Trump then went on to push his latest deflection tactic, claiming that any investigation into Epstein's relationships should be focused on Democrats. It follows Trump's Friday morning social media post where he directed his Attorney General Pam Bondi to investigate Epstein's relationship with prominent figures not named Trump. Folks like former President Bill Clinton, Clinton's former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, and LinkedIn co-founder and Democratic donor Reid Hoffman, among others. He added in an earlier social media post, quote, "Don't waste your time with Trump. I have a country to run." Let's not forget, Trump has long claimed the Epstein scandal to be a, quote, Democrat hoax. But now he's ordering an investigation into that so-called hoax. And Attorney General Bondi is more than happy to do Trump's bidding, saying the Department of Justice will, quote, pursue this with urgency and integrity. Meanwhile, the House of Representatives is getting ready to finally hold a vote on a measure compelling the Justice Department to release all of its files on Epstein. MS Now has learned that the tentative plan is for a vote to happen on Tuesday. When asked why he and his administration has been pressuring some of the House Republicans who had signed the discharge petition, like Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, Trump had this to say.
We think it's bad to talk about it because it gets away from the subject of how well the Republicans are doing. And when you talk about the Epstein hoax, what happens is you're not talking about how well we've done. And that's the whole purpose behind them. They want to waste people's time, and some of the dumber Republicans like that.
Joining us now, Laura Barone Lopez, MS Now White House reporter, and Mary McCord, former Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General for the National Security Division, co-host of the Main Justice podcast, and an MS Now legal analyst. Laura, Mary, welcome back to the weekend. Mary, so we just had that quote there, the President of the United States saying that this is a waste, that they want to waste people's time. He's also said that this is a waste of time. Here's a letter that Epstein survivor sent to Congress yesterday. And I'm going to read from it. It says, several weeks ago, when a few brave survivors stood before you and recounted their harrowing stories, many of you were shaken to your core. We urge you, when you cast your vote, please do not forget the horror you felt that day. There is no middle ground here. There is no hiding behind party affiliation. The testimonies you heard are just a fraction of the unimaginable suffering endured by more than 1,000 victims alike. Just, to me, it just seems unconscionable that you would have the president of the United States saying to the reporters, saying to the country, but most importantly, saying to the survivors that looking into this and getting all the information out possible is a waste of time.
I think that point is so important because, you know, whether these files are used by one side or the other as sort of a political fodder, a political football, what's important here is that the victims want these files released, right? Because early on in this, I was worried that maybe they would not, right? That some of them wouldn't want these very, very personal details about
the trauma.
Exactly, because having prosecuted sex offenses in my past life, you know, I know how traumatizing, lifelong traumatizing that can be. But these are the victims coming forward and the survivors and saying, we want this full accountability. So their voices resonate with me louder than any others. And to the direction to the Department of Justice, you know, we have now seen there's not even a facade of even-handedness now in the way this president tells his attorney general what to do and how she responds. And I do want to remind people, and I don't want to get ahead of where you all are, but I looked back to July and what the attorney general said about these files, because when it comes to Donald Trump now directing an investigation, she said, quote, "We did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties." Well, we've come full circle from that, haven't we? If now she thinks they're immediately something worth to investigate.
And that's exactly right. And I think the thing that's really interesting here, and Laura, in this White House, where they're having this conversation and they are feel under siege. I've talked to a couple folks. The thing that they know, and when you talk to voters, and the reason this isn't going anywhere, other than the survivors standing out there and putting their necks on the line, is that voters may not understand the ins and outs of every policy, prescription. What they understand is broken promises, right? They understand what corruption kind of feels and looks like, right? And so when you have a president that comes in office saying he's going to release all the files, when you have him running for 4 years during the Biden administration saying that something was there, then you have the now FBI director, the deputy FBI director, and the woman who is running who was the AG of this country, saying that there was something here and they had to release it. They kind of got everyone on the right excited that something was going to be here. They just thought it was going to be our Republicans. How are they handling this in the White House?
I mean, well, they've done a complete 180, as you just laid out. Look, the White House officials told us this week that essentially they know that it's a losing battle when it comes to the vote next week, that they expect it to potentially, to pass the House. Now, what happens in the Senate is we aren't totally sure yet right now, but whether or not it's even going to get a vote. That being said, I think there's a split between how aides view it and how the president views it, because aides view it as a losing battle. But the president throughout the week clearly felt like he wanted to be out there and to hammer Republicans on it and to try to pressure them. Now, he did that through his True Social posts. He did that by bringing Lauren Boebert to the Situation Room, which you cannot bring phones into, and to try to get her to take her name off of the discharge petition. So he did engage in a very last-minute effort to try to change where this vote was headed. That being said, I was talking to a House Republican this week who said, look, I think that the White House at least understands, and those around the president, that this is inevitable, that this is headed in a certain direction, and transparency is the only recourse now. But the president is clearly does not want these released. Despite what he said in the clip that you played, Jonathan, the president's actions don't match up with what he said, right? Because he is continuing to try to block the release of this, to try to deflect and distract in another direction by saying, oh, now let's investigate potential other relationships. So his actions don't match what he was saying to reporters.
And we talk to Democrats, they will say, yeah, investigate the Democrats too. Anyone who had anything to do.
Reid Hoffman said go ahead and investigate.
Like anyone that had anything to do with Jeffrey Epstein or raping these who were then little girls, investigate them.
And Mary, you talk about dropping the facade. I mean, Pam Bondi was a part of this political pressure campaign in the Situation Room to try to convince Lauren Boebert to take her name off that discharge petition. But there's another character that's also dropped the political facade here, which is Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General. He's the one who flew out to Colorado to meet with Ghislaine Maxwell after the fact, after their transcribed interview. She was moved to a lower security prison. He also claims that the White House and the Justice Department did not have any of these materials that were released this week. He responded in a post. When I interviewed Maxwell, law enforcement didn't have the materials Epstein's estate hid for years and only just provided to Congress. Is this incompetence or obfuscation from the DOJ?
Well, I can't disprove or prove whether he had those particular files, the particular texts and emails that we've all been reading this week. But we know they have many, many, many tens of thousands of pages of documents. And I'm sure that those 3 emails we saw this week are sort of not the only thing that could have been useful. When he interviewed Ghislaine Maxwell, he had a purpose in doing it. And it wasn't to ferret out the truth. And it wasn't to confront her with any of these types of texts or emails. And, on the dropping the facade point, I mean, what we know about the relationship between the president and this Department of Justice is that, whether you get investigated or prosecuted or whether you get pardoned or have your sentence commuted depends on whether you are a friend or a foe, whether you can be useful.
And on that point, President Trump was asked face to face about whether he was considering a pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell. Watch this, y'all.
Have you ruled out a pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell?
I haven't even thought about it. I mean, I haven't thought about it for months. Maybe I haven't thought about it at all. You're just asking me a question. But I don't talk about that. I don't rule it in or out. I don't even think about it.
My favorite part of this insane interaction, I haven't even thought about it. I mean, I haven't thought about it for months. Maybe I haven't thought about it at all.
It's like a poem.
Right, haiku. Laura, he's thinking about it. How could he not? Especially when Leavitt, the White House press secretary, last week said he's not thinking about it at this time or some word phrase.
Right, he's not closing the door on pardoning her, which when you say that in a full sentence, the president of the United States is potentially open to pardoning a convicted sex trafficker. And the easy answer you would think would be no. But under his administration, let's also play out what you were just talking about, which is that his personal attorney met with Ghislaine Maxwell, and then about a week later, she was moved to a low-security prison. And so the question that I hope, if I'm not able to ask the president, others in the White House press corps are able to ask, which is, you're the president of the United States. He's clearly directing the attorney general to launch investigations. Why not ask the director of the Bureau of Prisons to send Ghislaine Maxwell back to the high-security prison?
Right.
Because they have not answered any question like that. And no one so far has appeared in any of the reporting that we've done or others has disclosed who exactly signed off on that transfer.
Right.
Mary, I want to go to this email that really was one of the first ones that folks saw this week, that Democrats released and then Republicans released the rest of them. This is an Epstein email from 2011 between him and Maxwell, where Epstein says, quote, "That dog that hasn't barked is Trump." And then in brackets there, victim spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned. Maxwell to Epstein, I have been thinking about that, right? And the thing that, we hear from the White House is Donald Trump and Epstein were nowhere near each other for a very long time. And, Trump thought he was a creep, according to Carolyn Leavitt, the White House press secretary. This changes that, right? It's very clear that they were talking, at least, according to Epstein, talking in 2011. What does it say when we're seeing these releases in the courts, like if there is some kind of investigation, right, whether Trump says it or Democrats get power and then they do an investigation, right? These emails that are out right now are making clear that the timeline that the president and the White House set out was never true.
Yeah. I mean, these also just show that there is more there in terms of the relationship between not just Epstein and Trump, but Trump's knowledge of what Epstein was doing. And I think that's what's really critical here. And, you know, it doesn't mean, you know, I spoke with others the other night in a studio like this about, you know, is there a crime there? I mean, we don't know. Yeah. But, you know, there's certainly a moral obligation if you are aware of what Jeffrey Epstein was doing, aware of the girls that he was trafficking in, they're underage. There's certainly a moral obligation. And how much Trump might have actually aided and abetted that or not at all, just turned a blind eye. We don't know that. But that is why people are clamoring for these documents. And I wanted to say one more thing about this directing his attorney general to open an investigation. If Jay Clayton does open that investigation, and she said that he would, and he's going to do it urgently, notwithstanding 4 months ago her saying there's no third parties to investigate, that could have the effect of them saying we can't disclose these documents pursuant to a congressional subpoena because we have an open criminal investigation. Yeah. So this whole thing, to my mind, is a tactic to prevent the release of those documents.
Mary with the mic drop this morning. Thank you, Mary, for coming on, Mary McCord. Laura is staying with us because coming up, the brewing civil war among Trump's most fervent supporters over his focus on foreign policy. Now, Trump is withdrawing his support from Marjorie Taylor Greene, y'all, after her criticism of whether he's still America first. You're watching The Weekend on MS Now. We're starting to see some very real cracks in the MAGA coalition. Last night, President Trump withdrew his support for Georgia Congresswoman and one of his strongest supporters, Marjorie Taylor Greene. This has been a long time coming because she's been recently critical of the president and his focus on foreign policy after he campaigned on the idea of America first. The president wrote this on Truth Social last night, quote, "All I see is wacky Marjorie do is complain, complain, complain. I understand that wonderful conservative people are thinking about primarying Marjorie in her district of Georgia, that they are too fed up with her and her antics, and if the right person runs, they will have my complete and unyielding support." Greene fired back on X, writing, quote, "President Trump just attacked me and lied about me. But really, most Americans wish he would fight this hard to help the forgotten men and women of America who are fed up with foreign wars and foreign causes, are going broke, trying to feed their families, and are losing hope of ever achieving the American dream. For me, I remain America first and America only," 3 exclamation points. Laura Barone Lopez is back, and joining us is MS Now congressional reporter Kevin Fry. Kevin.
Don't accuse me of complaining.
No complaining here, but we work here. When you look at kind of the arc of Marjorie Taylor Greene and Donald Trump's relationship, any person with eyeballs knows this is like absolutely crazy that we're seeing this happen, right? When you talk to your sources on the Hill, how are other Republicans taking this in? Because at one point, I don't know if you guys talk to folks, I talk to folks who are like, ooh, now she's opening the door. Maybe there will be others who say similar things. We haven't really seen that. So how are other Republicans taking this?
I mean, to your point, I think we have to always preface this conversation about cracks within the MAGA movement, within the confines on Capitol Hill that Trump has himself, according to, I think, the New York Times within the last couple of months, basically proclaimed himself the Speaker of the House as well. And they basically do his will. I mean, look at the reconciliation votes earlier this year, where essentially you had everyone from the Freedom Caucus to the more moderate members in lockstep, which is extraordinary when you think of Republicans in general are always divisive in every regard. Could this maybe be an opening for some of those that are more eager and willing to cross the president? Surely, and certainly this Epstein vote this week is going to be perhaps the most dramatic moment of that. But I don't want us to overread fractures in the MAGA movement quite yet because of just the way that he always manages to keep everyone
corralled. It's also fracture between Marjorie and Donald Trump.
Right.
It doesn't seem to be spreading like
But I do think the fracture that you're seeing here is something that I think a lot of Republicans are going to have to contend with as we get closer to 2028, right? Like, this is what Donald Trump is doing is legacy building, and what Marjorie Taylor Greene is doing is working towards continuing to hold up the mantle of the MAGA movement.
And the president himself has more or less admitted this when he's talking about doing kind of his foreign travels and so forth, that especially when it becomes the executive, your last term in office, that is your chance to really kind of plant a flag on the global stage, is through these legacy building, and particularly the Middle East, for example. Whereas he's not really getting himself fully entangled in the legislative process, which, I mean, arguably he never really wanted to do much of that anyway.
Right.
But, I mean, look, this is like, I think what you're getting at, and I think what's important here, is that when we look to 2028, with President Trump starting to ride off into the distance, who picks up that mantle? And I don't know that there's a definitive answer yet. And Marjorie is trying to, I think, say, this is clearly what America First is, and you are not responding to that.
But Laura, let's when we talk about fractures in the MAGA movement, right now, to my ear, it sounds like we're talking about fractures among the people in the building outside that window. Right. But seems to be a fracture happening within the MAGA movement outside of Washington. And there have been plenty of examples for the last few months, but they've just sort of exploded onto the scene. For instance, NBC reported that Trump's new $100,000 visa fee sets off panic and confusion. There's a New York Times story from yesterday, America First. Some Trump supporters worry that's no longer the case. And I'm going to read this. When you're president, you really sort of have to watch over the world because you're going to be dragged into it, said Trump, who argued in his first term that the United States could no longer be a policeman of the world. When somebody makes a statement about he's devoting time to the world, well, the world is the United States, he added. And there are other examples.
Right.
But talk about that fracture within the MAGA movement and how that might impact not just 28, but 26.
Yeah, there are more fractures occurring, I think, at a steady pace than just this one between Marjorie Taylor Greene and Trump, just on Epstein. There are the frustrations around the Epstein files because the MAGA base want these files released. There are the people upset about his interview this week with Laura Ingraham, where he said that America didn't have certain talent and that he was thinking about, letting in more foreign high-skilled workers and students. And that upset a lot of Republicans and MAGA base figures.
Actually, we have that.
Yeah.
We have that clip. Let's play that sound from the interview on Tuesday.
Does that mean the H-1B visa thing will not be a big priority for your administration? Because if you want to raise wages for American workers, you can't flood the country with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of foreign workers.
You also do have to bring in talent.
We have plenty of talented people here.
No, you don't.
We don't have talented people here?
No, you don't have certain talents.
Someone been on the phone with Elon
That
Musk
dismissiveness is what one former Trump advisor called cavalier and said that it was problematic and that I will say that those around him, his allies, those in the White House, think that none of this is irreparable, that he hasn't done irreparable harm, that they can potentially fix it. But you do see where the president this week is acknowledging the poll numbers because of the fact that, on tariffs, on Epstein, on the economy, he is not doing well across the board with the American people. And so this week, what did the White House do? They lowered tariffs on bananas and coffee and other goods because they are realizing that some of his policies are not sitting well with the American people.
Something that I think I've been so surprised by is that Trump is usually so good at kind of understanding the pulse of especially his base, right? He understands perception. He understands kind of like the showmanship of the presidency. But this shows that even that skill set has some cracks in it, right? Because as you said, Kevin, he's thinking about the legacy. We're headed to the House. The House seems that they got 218. It sounds like there's a lot more of Republicans who are going to vote yes on this discharge petition, right? My question is, when we get to the Senate, right, what happens there? Because it's not exactly clear. I think there have been murmurings of folks being like, it's DOA. They're not going to vote for it at all. But what do you hear?
Well, so Senator Thune has not made any promises. And that's kind of the starting point. I think the thing to watch is going to be, one, on the House side, Massey is promising that there will be dozens upon dozens of Republicans that break and vote with Democrats for this. So do you get to a veto-proof majority? That's going to be, I think, marker number one. Marker two, then, is does that amp up pressure on Thune to do something? There are more institutionalist Republicans, obviously, in the Senate than there are on the House side, and so that might dissuade them from wanting to even touch this or get involved in any of this. But if there is a vote, and you're already seeing some pressure campaign out there. I mean, Senator Jackie Rosen, this was one Democratic senator, but has sent a letter to Thune basically saying, put this up for a vote. You need to do this. If there is a vote there, then the next marker, again I say, is veto-proof majority, because at the end of the day, and we cannot express this enough, the president has to sign this. Right. And so if this gets to him and it happened to just be the bare minimum votes on the Senate side, like, this is all a fait accompli, it doesn't matter, but it is obviously a demonstration of some of the fissures that we're seeing over an issue that Trump himself sort of embraced on the campaign trail before now backing away from it entirely.
I guess we're going to have to keep a close eye on Senator Thune and see if he continues to run his workplace like the State Duma, as Steve Bannon once put it. But Laura Barone Lopez, Kevin Fry, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
No problem.
Still to come, the potential 2026 ballot box disaster, waiting for the GOP if they continue their unwavering opposition to extending the Obamacare subsidies that make health care affordable for millions of their own constituents. You're watching The Weekend on MS Now. After 43 days of pain and uncertainty for Americans, and specifically federal workers, the longest ever government shutdown is over. But the brawl over health care is just beginning. The legislation signed Thursday does not address Democrats' key demand on extending Affordable Care Act subsidies, which are expiring. Senate Majority Leader John Thune has promised a vote on an ACA funding bill by mid-December. A senior Democratic aide told MS Now senior congressional reporter Ali Vitale, it's not like Dems didn't get anything. Politically, it's now a more salient issue than it ever would have been, and it matters going into an election about the cost of living and the economy. Mm-hmm. I mean, I am old enough to remember when Kayleigh McEnany came out on 60 Minutes with a binder full of plans about Trump's health care plan, only for it to have nothing related to healthcare in it.
And I think we might have some of that, or at least Kayleigh McEnany in the beginning interview. Let's play some of Trump's healthcare plans over the years.
Yes, over time.
It all includes fixing the health care.
You'll have better plans. You'll get your own doctor. If we don't do something quickly, you're going to have a health care problem that you've never seen before in this country.
Leslie, the president wanted me to deliver his health care plan. It's a little heavy.
Oh, my God. This is his health care plan.
Yes.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan.
Concepts. We still ain't seen even the concepts.
I mean, this is the thing, though, about healthcare, right? That I feel a little bit like a broken record this week, but it is an excellent and politically expedient talking point.
Yeah.
But when it comes to actually proposing something in place of Democrats' most successful legislative achievement in modern history, you cannot take away people's health care, as you always say, Eugene.
Once you give someone something, you can't take it away in this country. And I think that the issue that the Republican Party is dealing with the most is that there are a lot of people in their party that don't think the federal government should have anything to do with health care. Right. And so you can't get over that hump, right? And I think I think we disagree, because I heard you say, to the Democrats. I think that in Democrats, whether they won or lost this shutdown, that's not the language I would use. But I think what I'm hearing and seeing from folks, especially younger folks, is that the expectation was that they would get something, right? I think that when you go into these kinds of fights, the expectation needs to be very clear. Think about when the Texas Democrats left Texas, and they said, we know we're not going to stop this vote forever. We just want the conversation to start. That's not what Democrats promised. Democrats promised something very different than what they ended up getting.
Yeah, okay, fine. On that one small picayune note. However, to go back to Jackie said, you're old enough to remember. Well, I'm older
just a little bit.
Older enough to remember that the other thing about this is the way Donald Trump talks about health care. It's as if, oh, you're hungry? We'll just go out and we'll go to the supermarket and buy some food and everything will be fine. Health care as we have seen when Hillary Clinton tried to do something about it when she was First Lady, when Barack Obama actually did it. But do we remember the fights that we went through just to get what we have right now? So if Republicans think that they're going to solve the affordability crisis as it pertains to health care in a matter of a few legislative days, then they are in for a world of hurt.
We're going to have to leave it there. We'll see. The hurt ain't going nowhere, though.
Right.
We are. Because coming up next, Maryland Governor Wes Moore and his strong message to President Trump on the GOP's redistricting push, and the latest on the DOJ's move to block California's new congressional map approved by voters just last week. You're watching The Weekend only on MS Now. If you're looking for the strongest and most effective pushback on the Trump administration, it's coming from Democratic governors. Folks like Gavin Newsom of California, who has been leading the fight against Republican redistricting efforts ahead of next year's midterm elections. On Friday, the Justice Department announced they will join an existing lawsuit with California Republicans in an effort to block the state's new congressional redistricting plan, which voters overwhelmingly approved just last week. Yes, that was just last week. Another key player in this redistricting battle is Governor Wes Moore of Maryland, who had this to say after a Washington Post article accused him of disenfranchising his Republican constituents.
I can respond to the Washington Post with 5 letters: IDGAF.
Joining us now is Maryland Governor Wes Moore with the IDGAF. Sir, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Look at him laughing. Just
Oh my God, that laugh says everything.
I want to start there, Governor. I think the thing that I found most interesting kind of over the last few months is that Republicans, President Trump, went to Texas, said, give us some votes. And I think what they thought your party, you governors, would do is say, we are never going to do that. Like, you shouldn't be doing that. We shouldn't redistrict in the middle. And you guys have called their bluffs. And I'm curious how you think the rest of this is going to play out, because I want to pull up some other redistricting efforts. Maps approved, red states Texas, Ohio, Missouri, and North Carolina. So far, just California for blue states. Kansas, Indiana, and Utah are efforts that are failed and stalled. In May redistrict, Nebraska and Florida, red states, Illinois, Virginia, Maryland, New York, blue states. It's when you look at that map and seeing all of the things that are changing, are you surprised that that Democrats, you're going to say no? I know you're going to say no, but if you're really honest with yourself, are you surprised that the party was like, no, we're actually you want to play fire with fire? Let's do that.
No, because I think I'm not going to stand for the blatant hypocrisy. And the point that I was making, when people want to come bring smoke to Maryland, because we're saying that we want fair maps, but you sit on your hands and sit quiet and have nothing to say about Ohio, or have nothing to say about Missouri, or nothing to say about Texas. Literally, you are just parroting Donald Trump's talking points. And here's the thing: if you look at the quest for fair maps inside of the state of Maryland, it's actually a bipartisan push. We've had Republicans just yesterday come out and say they want to introduce legislation around fair maps, and so that is why I ordered a bipartisan redistricting advisory committee that is now going to actually listen to people, because our map should not be decided in smoke-filled rooms, and definitely should not be decided because Donald Trump wants to call state legislatures and say, I need you to find me additional congressional seats. That's not how democracy should work. So Maryland will go through Maryland's process in a bipartisan fashion, and we will ensure, the work of our commission will ensure, that we will have fair maps come next November.
But Governor, the commission is bipartisan, but you have had some opposition from people in your own party. Democrat Bill Ferguson, the Maryland Senate president, has come out in the past month publicly and privately castigating efforts to do this, to engage in redistricting. He said the legal risks are too great for what is an uncertain outcome. What do you have to say to some of the concerns that efforts to redistrict are becoming a political litmus test to be involved in the conversation when it comes to looking ahead to the 2028 Democratic presidential primary?
Well, listen, I respect Bill Ferguson. I just could not disagree with him more on these legal risks. And also, it's not just me. It's also constitutional lawyers. It's also people like our Attorney General and our former Attorney General. It's also people like Jamie Raskin, who have also put out a public letter saying that there is an overestimation about what we consider to be the downside legal risk on this. And by asking the people, by actually saying that we want the people's input to make sure we have fair maps, I never find defending democracy to be a risky proposition. So where I differ on this is, I think this moment requires fight. I think this moment requires urgency. I think this moment requires us stepping up and standing up and saying that Donald Trump should not be the one to determine what our democracy looks like. That actually is something that the people should determine. And we've had national redistricting efforts, and I think Congress actually needs to take the larger role in this. But do you know who voted against national redistricting efforts before? Andy Harris. The person who's now saying that what we're doing is a sham. And so again, the hypocrisy is just astounding. And it's just, and I'm not here for it. And the people of Maryland, we're going to make sure that I'm not going to listen to Donald Trump. And frankly, I'm not going to listen to national Democrats on that as well. I'm going to listen to my people. And the people of Maryland are going to make sure that we have fair maps come next November.
Governor, let's switch gears and talk about immigration. On Tuesday, WMAR in Baltimore reported that contract bids show ICE planning to expand operations in Maryland during immigration shutdown. And I'm wondering, how are you in the state of Maryland planning to fight back against this planned increase in ICE agents?
Yeah, I mean, this issue is the absurdity and the lack of humanity in the way that this issue is even being approached is just staggering. And I think we're seeing that across states all around the country. And for me, immigration is a very personal issue. I come from a family of immigrants. And public safety is something that I take very, very seriously. We have seen how Maryland has had amongst the fastest drops in violent crime anywhere in the United States of America because we take violent crime, accountability, and prosecution for it very, very seriously. I also know this, with a broken immigration system that Congress needs to be the ones to fix, we are going to make sure that we are following the Constitution in the way that we're doing our work. The challenge that I have for what we've seen from ICE is that they don't seem to care about neither violent crime nor care about following the Constitution. And so when I'm watching parents who are here legally, who are afraid to pick up their children from school because they heard ICE is in the area and they do not want to be abducted, that is a fundamental problem. And so that's why I was proud to sign legislation that actually made things like our churches and our schools safe havens. It was the reason that I was able to actually sign legislation coming up with legal reinforcements and for legal defense funds to make sure that due process is actually being followed. It's the reason that we have sued the Trump administration because you cannot divvy out state dollars based on immigration policies. And so we are going to continue to make sure we're protecting Marylanders, protecting our people, following the Constitution, and making sure that we can prioritize addressing violent crime within our communities and our neighborhoods.
Governor, in that vein of protecting, one of the things that governors have had to do, Republican and Democratic governors have had to do over the last few months is figure out how to kind of federal-proof your state, right? You have been able to count on, mostly under Democratic and Republican presidents and majority and minorities in the House or Senate, depend on the federal government to do what it says it's going to do, right? January 30th, we'll have another fight over a government shutdown. So what are the things that you and the other Democratic governors are doing after learning the lesson of just last week of making sure that your state is federal government proofed, that you are able to do what you need to do and keep your people fed and paid in some kind of way, no matter what the federal government is doing or not doing?
Well, we have seen the relationship between the federal government and our states. It's not that it's been altered. In many cases, it's just been severed. And so we have decided that we have got to focus on a few different things in our state. One is we have to make sure we're growing our economy, but also diversifying off of the federal government and making sure that we're investing in industries of the future like life sciences, like IT, like aerospace and defense. We have to make sure that we're coming up with additional protections for our people. So when we saw, for example, that the President of the United States was going to cut SNAP benefits, knowing that that is a federal requirement, and he was actually literally breaking the law so people could starve. I actually tapped into the Fiscal Responsibility Fund, which is actually paid through by capital gains tax, and I allocated an additional $62 million to make sure that no matter what the President of the United States was going to do or say, for as long as possible, we were going to make sure that our people were receiving SNAP benefits. And we're making sure we were coming up with legal challenges at every single turn. You know, we just recently announced another lawsuit against the Trump administration why he tried to pull the FBI building out of the state of Maryland unlawfully. And so we are going to continue using every single tool in our toolkit to make sure that our people are protected. I think there's no better time when people talk about how powerful the president is. I want people to know how powerful their governors are right now, too.
Governor Wes Moore sounded presidential real quick. Yes or no? You gonna run for president?
I am not running. I'm proud to be running for re-election, though, and I'm excited for it. We're ready.
Governor Wes Moore, thank you very much for coming back to the weekend. And remember, if you've got a question or a comment for us at home, go check us out on Blue Sky or Instagram and drop us a line. Our producers will surprise us with them later on in the show. Our new handle everywhere is @TheWeekendMSNow.
We'll see if that answer holds up from Wes Moore, but I'm running for president. We have much more ahead in our next hour. Jackie had an exclusive interview with Jack Schlossberg, and he's running for Congress. Plus, the response from the White House to Schlossberg's blistering criticism of his own cousin, Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. of HHS. You're watching The Weekend, only on MS Now. Welcome back to The Weekend on MS Now. I'm Eugene Daniels here with Jonathan Capehart and Jackie Alamany. Grab that other cup of coffee or multiple because we have a blockbuster hour ahead. New mugs, babe, that's how you know it's real. Starting with Trump's escalating retribution campaign. The administration referred Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell to the DOJ over its favorite allegation, mortgage fraud. Plus, there are developments in the cases against James Comey, and Letitia James. George Conway and Ankush Khardori are standing by to break it all down. Then, the latest on the redistricting wars, with some significant losses and roadblocks for Republicans, despite this being a battle that they wanted and started. And Jackie's exclusive interview with Jack Schlossberg, who announced this week that he's running for Congress. He ain't holding back when it comes to his cousin, HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. You don't want to miss that. But we begin this hour with President Trump ramping up that retribution campaign. Next up on his perceived enemies list, Democratic Congressman and vocal Trump critic Eric Swalwell. This week, NBC News reported that a Trump official refers Swalwell to the Justice Department over alleged mortgage fraud allegations, which he denies. It's a familiar accusation by the Trump administration. We've talked about it a lot. 3 other folks Trump sees as foes have faced the same allegations this year. Meanwhile, former CIA Director John Brennan has received a subpoena in connection with the probe into the intelligence community's assessment of Russian interference in the 2016 election. It's part of a case where, according to MS Now reporting, 2 prosecutors resigned and others are on, quote, pins and needles after being asked to take part in a conspiracy investigation into some of Trump's most high-profile rivals, including former President Barack Obama. And this is all happening while another part of Trump's retribution campaign could be in jeopardy. On Thursday, a federal judge sounded skeptical that Lindsay Halligan, the DOJ prosecutor who indicted former FBI Director James Comey, and New York Attorney General Letitia James, was lawfully appointed. Remember, Halligan is a former member of Trump's legal team with no prosecutorial experience, and was handpicked by Trump after he forced out the original prosecutor. The judge confirmed that, quote, Halligan acted alone in grand jury proceedings and was concerned that there was missing portions in a grand jury transcript, casting doubt on Attorney General Pam Bondi's review of the Comey indictment. Now, it's still unclear if the judge's open doubts on Halligan's appointment will get the cases thrown out, but the judge said she'll make a ruling by Thanksgiving. Joining us now, Ankush Khardori, former federal prosecutor and senior writer for Politico magazine, and George Conway, conservative lawyer and president of the Society for the Rule of Law. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on this historic new day here at MS Now. I want to start with kind of the question that that defendants and their teams keep saying, that Halligan or Alina Habba in New Jersey are not rightfully and constitutionally appointed, and therefore all the cases should be thrown out. How do you guys see that? Ankush, I'm going to start with you.
Oh, I actually think the argument's fairly persuasive that
really?
The defendants have made.
Do you agree?
Yeah.
Yes. Persuasive?
Yeah.
Why?
If you read, because if you read the provision that is at issue here concerning who serves in an interim U.S. attorney capacity when there's not a Senate confirmed capacity, I think the correct reading of it is that the president can install one interim U.S. attorney for 120 days, and after that, either the district court needs to appoint them, which happens regularly, or you need to have a Senate-confirmed U.S. attorney. I think that is the best reading of the provision, the one that makes the most sense of it.
And you can't just keep adding.
No, you only get one 120-day period, because if you had more than one 120-day period, the statute would make no sense. Why would you?
No reason to have it.
Why would you have a Senate?
Exactly. Yeah. Right. And the consequences in the cases of a dismissal could be a little different, because in Comey's case, for instance, the statute of limitations has probably run, so you couldn't just refile that case, even if you managed to get a U.S. attorney Senate confirmed.
And can we pivot to Eric Swalwell, the Eric Swalwell news that broke yesterday? He's obviously denying claims that he committed mortgage fraud. Actually, let's listen to what he said last night on the weeknight when, Jonathan, you were on that show last night.
These allegations are false, just like the allegations against Adam Schiff are false, and Letitia James are false, and Lisa Cook are false. And a spoiler alert for you, there will be allegations next week against somebody that'll be false. No, the Justice Department has not said anything, just through leaked media reporting. But this is really about Donald Trump going after his political enemies. And no one has been a more vocal critic than me. And as you mentioned, I have one of the only remaining lawsuits against Donald Trump for his role on January 6th.
Sorry, that was on Thursday night. But George, I hate to just jump straight to the politics of this, but it doesn't seem like there's all that much merit on its face of these allegations. But is this now becoming a political boon for people who are being accused of such things? I mean, I went to a few people yesterday who and with just some sort of, normal probing questions about this, and their immediate reactions back to me were, this is great for Eric Swalwell. He can fundraise off of this. This only further raises his profile. I mean, have we gotten to that point yet where where we've crossed the Rubicon with the amount and how sort of obviously political the Trump administration is making this?
Look, I think if the President of the United States is sending people to go after you, you must be doing something right. And I think a lot of people in the public can figure that out. So, I mean, if I were running for office, I'd certainly be happy to have the President of the United States trying to attack me. In fact, I'd invite it.
But there's still the legal aspect of it, right?
The legal aspect, I mean,
it costs money.
I was
it's embarrassing.
Right. I guess that, I mean, that's right, and that's a problem. But if you give into that, you're just going to get more of it. And I think right now you could, as you were saying, he could raise money off of it. People want to fight this man, and if somebody gets into a fight them rhetorically, peacefully in court with their voices, words, sandwiches. No, sorry. Sorry, no sandwiches. Sorry, I'm anti-throwing sandwich. I want to make that clear.
Well, we're going to get more of it. More fights, sandwiches. More fights with the president, rhetorically speaking. Yes. Because here's what the president had to say. When was this? Yesterday on Air Force One. Just listen to what he says. He believes his power is in terms of ordering investigations.
Do you continue to believe that president should be able to order investigations?
Sure. I mean, I'm the chief law enforcement officer of the country. Not that I want to use that, but I am considered the chief law enforcement agent in the country, and I'm allowed to do it.
Ankush, okay, let's fact check his response. I'm the chief law enforcement officer of the country. True or false?
That is not how we typically regard the president. We have an attorney general as the chief law enforcement officer. Until Pam Bondi arrived on the scene, we recognize there should be some distinction between those two functions.
And he says, I'm allowed to do it, meaning order up investigations. True or false?
I mean, I guess technically he is allowed to do it. I mean, he is the president. Whether it's a good idea or whether it is a grotesque abuse of authority is a separate matter.
It is a grotesque abuse of authority. I'm not the lawyer.
Let me help. You know how to read. Let me apply some technical legal reasoning here to unlock it. He is the chief law enforcement officer, and he has sworn to execute the Constitution and laws of the United States. Laws are the key word. Okay, it's not that he gets to just decide stuff. He has to decide stuff that's in accordance with the law and following the law, which means that he can't decide things just to get his enemies. He has to have a legal basis for them. His people have to have a legal basis for them. And the problem with Donald Trump and his view of his Article 2 powers is he's unconstrained by law, which is completely inconsistent with his oath and with his duties.
Are clips like that, are they copy and pasted into any argument any defense attorney is making right now about vindictive prosecution?
Absolutely. I mean, and so for some people it's even easier in the Comey case.
And Letitia James.
But the Comey in particular, they attached this appendix to their moving affidavit on one of the motions on pretrial publicity, where it was like 90 pages, a 90-page spreadsheet, in essence, of every insane thing that Donald Trump had ever said about James Comey. And it just goes on and on and on and on and on.
What does it do to the American people's view of law and justice in this country? I feel like I know this answer, but I think it's important to talk about because even as we're discussing it, in my head, I'm still struggling with the idea that we have seemingly, as a country, just accepted that Donald Trump can order an investigation on anyone, right? That the president of the United States can tell his attorney general to do something, and she will start to do it, right? I think like it is important for people to understand that is not how this operates, and it's bad for democracy.
In order to do it via social media,
right? There's also embarrassing. Right. If you're going to do it, let's not do it in the most embarrassing, weird way possible on the internet.
I thank him for making it all public.
Really? Say more about that.
I think it's good for us to know how transparent it all is. I mean,
it's not exactly transparent.
I actually kind of agree with that.
Well, no, I mean, yesterday he announced, reopen the Epstein investigation, but only focus on my political opponents and don't look anywhere near me, was the implication.
Doesn't that risk normalizing it though? If he says that, and so
he's the one who's normalizing because he's the one doing the.
We're all normalizing it, right?
Here's what he does, right? He says the courts are corrupt. Right. Biden is corrupt. These are Biden judges. He delegitimizes what he wants to illegitimately use. And that's his technique. He's normalizing it. And the way you fight back is by calling it out. And I get that the fear is that the more of it we have, the more it becomes normalized. But we actually have to speak out and say, this is not the way it's supposed to operate. And the fact that he's doing it so openly is making people aware of how different this is from normality.
I think that's true, but I also think it makes people feel like because when people do bad things, right, especially lawmakers or people with power, they do it behind closed doors. So if you're doing it in front of cameras, I think everyday people, including folks like us, are looking at it and saying, well, maybe there's no there because you would never do something illegal.
That's one of his magic tricks.
Exactly what I'm saying. That's the risk.
I also think, though, unfortunately, a lot of everyday people look at the relationship between the DOJ and the White House to begin with and suspect that these things are being done behind closed doors anyways, whether or not that is the way they're supposed to work. But I am, just because this story does not die and has been so gripping, especially this week, I want Ankush, you to put on, and George as well, to put on your political hat for a second. Doesn't it just draw more attention to the Epstein issue for Trump to suddenly open up a slew of other investigations and continue to keep it in the bloodstream and potentially cause the further opportunities for the release of these documents?
Yes, I'll say a couple of things. Yes, I suspect the motivation is to try to get ahead of the vote next week and to create some sort of argument for lobbying the House Republicans to vote the discharge petition down. I don't think it will work, but I do think that that is one possible reason he's doing this. The second thing I would say is the administration and House Republicans have been doing this for months, creating storylines to extend this, right? When they decided to go to the courts for the grand jury transcripts, which I think most of us knew would be a futile exercise, and the judges confirmed it was a pointless exercise in which the Justice Department was effectively misleading the public. That was a story they created. The Todd Blanche's decision to go down to speak to Ghislaine Maxwell for a couple of days, totally nuts. But that created a story.
Where they just publicized what are apparent lies, that Trump was never in Jeffrey Epstein's house.
Right. So more stuff is coming out. The House Republicans' decision to open this investigation in the first place is generating these revelations that's keeping this story going. So it is kind of politically inept on some level that they've been doing this, when the conventional wisdom, I would think, would be keep your head down, be quiet, and hope it all blows over.
Let's not forget they spent years drumming this up. It is like Democrats were not talking about releasing Epstein files until the Republican apparatus, whether it's the podcasters or the folks online or on Fox News, were talking about it, right, and saying that it should be released and that there was something there. So like they drummed it all up, and now they're having to deal with it.
And then, the photo op in front of the White House with the binders.
That said, Epstein part 1.
Right,
part one.
Promising part 2.
A crisis of their making. Ankush and George are sticking with us. Coming up, after a months-long standstill, a new prosecutor has taken over Georgia's election interference suit against Donald Trump and over a dozen of his allies. What that could mean for the case and the president moving forward. You're watching The Weekend, only on MS Now. Donald Trump may be back in office, but the Georgia election interference case against him isn't going anywhere, at least for now. The investigation into Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election results in Georgia will now be in the hands of Peter Skandalakis, director of the Prosecuting Attorneys Council of Georgia. Skandalakis appointed himself to replace Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis, who was removed from the case last year after no one else wanted the job. As the AP points out, legal action against Trump is unlikely to proceed while he's president, but 14 other defendants still face charges. Ankush Kardori and George Conway are back with us. Ankush, Mr. Skandalakis had to appoint himself.
That's crazy.
Because no one else wanted the job. What is he up against, and what do you think the end goal should be here? Is it just to keep this alive until through 2029?
I don't think that should be his objective. And look, the reason why I suspect he's in this unenviable position is a couple of reasons, I would imagine. One is that the case is a bit of a political hot potato in Georgia, and if you're an ambitious prosecutor, maybe you don't want to take it on and sort of sully your reputation. The other is this case was really not managed very well. And if you're a prosecutor coming in cold, why would you want to inherit it? Excuse me?
Why does this sully your why would it sully your reputation?
Well, look what happened to Fani Willis. I mean, she attracted the ire of the whole
George Trump, right? Her issue was the management, not that the case.
Oh no! No. They were going at her. They were going at her irrespective of the issue. Now she created an issue. Yeah,
here's why you don't want to have this case and be a prosecutor. Who's going to be happy with whatever you do? You're going to have half the people saying you didn't push it hard enough, and then you're going to have the other half saying this should have been dismissed on day one when you appointed yourself. There is no way. I mean, it's a crappy job because no one is going to be happy at the end of the day. And it's been sitting there so long because of it became a big mess because of Fani Willis and her boyfriend, and also became a big mess, frankly, because they brought too big a case, right? They tried to make it the most massive state RICO case in the history of mankind and just made it much more complicated to litigate.
Which is another thing you might not want to inherit.
Right. I mean, because how do you have to untangle that? So if I were being appointed as, what a name, Skandalakis, right?
It's a great
perfect name for a prosecutor. If I were parachuting in there, I would look at the case, try to figure out ways to trim it into little bite-sized chunks, and then make a determination whether I think the case should be charged.
I agree with that.
So hold on. So why is this case so complicated when you've got evidence like this?
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state, and flipping the state is a great testament to our country because, you know, it's a testament that they can admit to a mistake or whatever you want to call it.
So when you've got evidence like this, why is this so complicated?
Jonathan, that's the point. It didn't have to be, for that reason, for what you just showed on the screen, it didn't have to be this mega case with every single conceivable defendant. So how does all in one case, all bound
So
together?
you would have gotten rid of the RICO charge.
I mean, I might have, or I might have broken them up into separate conspiracies.
Is the RICO charge like, do you need it, or does it need to go away?
No, you did not need to bring the RICO charge.
So Scandalakis
The RICO charge is what you needed to bring everyone under the same umbrella,
If
correct?
you wanted to do that, but you didn't necessarily have to do that, nor is that the only theory that would have allowed you to join all the defendants in one case. So, I'm sorry, just to answer your question, what you just described, or what you just played, is a perfectly good reason for state prosecutors to pursue Trump. It was an extremely good reason for the Justice Department under the Biden administration to pursue Trump, but they completely screwed that up. But that alone does not tell you that, Trump was in a conspiracy with Mark Meadows. He was in a conspiracy with Giuliani. That is a legal concept that is going to require prosecutors to introduce evidence that there was an agreement between Trump and these other individuals to pursue this corrupt endeavor, right? So the phone call alone is not going to allow you to do that, but other evidence conceivably would.
So as you guys are watching, as we move forward, and Scandalakis is now in charge of this case, how do you think he cuts the chunks? Because at the end of the day, what's really important, I think, for viewers to understand, because they saw this week Rudy Giuliani getting a pardon, all these people getting pardons for this. However, that is only federal charges. So these cases, even if Rudy or Powell, Sidney Powell, any of those folks are caught up in this in Georgia, and they're found guilty, they can still can still be an issue.
I would try to figure out a way to carve the case up and cut it down into either smaller RICO cases or
What does
smaller.
that mean?
It basically, you can, I mean, as Ankush was saying, it's just because one person is conspiring with one person here, one person's conspiring with one person here, doesn't mean they are all connected into one conspiracy. RICO has this way of basically glomming a bunch of conspiracies together, but you can create smaller RICO cases or focus on smaller conspiracies.
So Trump and Giuliani and Sidney Powell over here.
That make the cases easier to try, easier to digest. And also, I mean, at this point in time, given that the case is so stale and so old, I think it would look better for the prosecutor. I say look better. It may not be full justice that you would want, to basically trim the sails of this prosecution and focus on the people who are most culpable or who you had the best cases against. And at least then, if you go forward and prosecute those cases, you will be able to say, look, I exercised discretion here. I exercised some judgment. I made some selection. Some people who might have done some things, we focused on the really bad guys, and I think that might make the case stronger, and I think it would do some justice because some of these people do deserve to go to jail for what they did.
I mean, this case might be old, but that evidence we just played it remains piping hot. Ankush Kadori.
If you're him, do you go after Trump really quickly?
I'm trying to
I know. I
get out of here.
As a constitutional matter, there's zero chance of going after Donald J. Trump while he is president of the United States.
But is this the only case that is still open?
You know what?
Against Donald Trump?
Yeah.
I mean, I have to go. My mind is so numb for the last 3 years of all these cases, but I think
that the Republic know about, right? The Manhattan case, trial, the Justice Department's cases.
It's just been sitting there in limbo.
On appeal,
Talk about limbo.
Limbo.
Ankush Kadori, George Conway, thank you as always for coming to the weekend. Come back from England, messing stuff up. Still ahead, Republican efforts to redraw state maps ahead of next year's midterm elections are not going as well as they had hoped as they suffer back-to-back losses this week. We'll talk about what it might mean for control of Congress next. You're watching The Weekend on MS Now. Republicans are not only taking losses in elections, they're facing setbacks on their nationwide redistricting effort. Yesterday, lawmakers in Indiana defied President Trump and decided not to redraw the state's congressional maps, which would have delivered 2 additional seats to the Republican Party. Despite immense pressure from the White House, the state's Republican supermajority did not have the votes to support a new map. Also this week, a Utah judge rejected new congressional district lines drawn by Republican state lawmakers and instead approved a map that creates a Democratic-leaning district ahead of the 2026 midterm elections. In Kansas, top Republicans failed to get enough support from their own party to redraw a new congressional map that would deliver another seat in Congress to Republicans. Since some lawmakers resisted the plan for a special legislative session, the one Democratic-leaning congressional district in Kansas remains for now. You've got redistricting efforts and all these things. It seems to me like the courts, but also some elected officials are starting to look around at what's happening and deciding, you know what, no, I don't want this.
This falls under the category for me of don't start none, won't be none, right? President Trump went around saying, go find me these votes. They thought the Democrats weren't going to do anything. Then the Democrats called their bluff. And so now you have to force not just one super red state, you have to try to force other states to do the same thing. And what you're seeing is, and I don't even know if these Republicans in like Indiana are like standing up to Donald Trump, right? I think they're like, nah, girl, we ain't got the votes. You know, like you give them their cookies for that, I guess. But like at the end of the day, it's not even really like a civil war over it. It's they're saying at the end of the day, we don't have the votes for it. We didn't want this fight. This is y'all's fight. You got the Texas one, move on.
But Jackie, I mean, I think when you've got a party that has as the head, President Trump, who's made it clear, you don't do what I want, right, I'm going to rain fire on you. It is significant, I think.
No, it is, yeah.
People.
But not everybody has all these ambitions to get to Congress. So maybe they just want to be state lawmakers forever.
It's not my job to advocate for one side or the other, but I keep coming back to the 2019 Elena Kagan dissent on gerrymandering, in which she said that this is a force that could irreparably damage our system of government. And the more and more reading I do on this, and the more we learn about how disillusioned the American public across both parties is with our current political system and the ways that redistricting certain places could entrench a party trifecta for years to come and further polarize the system that we're living in. Those warnings just keep resonating. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when they go low, we go high.
Girl, they said when we go low, they go to hell. Like that is a Democratic mantra.
But you know what, though? We look at California because Governor Newsom did what he did. But let's not forget, in that law, it says we will revert back to our independent redistricting commission, and that is important.
Jonathan, always reading the spark notes. The footnotes. We'll have to leave it there. Up next, my exclusive sit-down with Jack Schlossberg, President Kennedy's only grandson, who just announced his bid for Congress. We'll talk about what inspired the run, his criticisms of his cousin, HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and his unique social media presence. You're watching The Weekend on MS Now. During his 1961 inaugural address, John F. Kennedy famously implored a new generation of Americans to serve their country. Almost 65 years later, his only grandson is now heeding that call. Schlossberg announced earlier this week that he's running for Congress, seeking to succeed Congressman Gerald Nadler, who's retiring after 34 years representing the heart of Manhattan. I spoke to Schlossberg shortly before he had launched his campaign about why he's throwing his hat in the ring, Donald Trump's obsession with the Kennedy family name, and his reaction to his cousin Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s tenure as HHS Secretary. Here's part of that conversation. Online, you are known as @JackUno, which you are well known as amongst your fans and followers. The support and enthusiasm that you have garnered has even spawned lookalike contests in cities across the country. And now we're seeing high-profile politicians, people like Gavin Newsom, who are actually mimicking your style, your trolling for a cause model, your tone, and your memes and your trolling. You've obviously gained a lot of influence as a political outsider. Why run as an insider? Why run for Congress?
I'm running for office because 250 years after our country was founded, we're in a crisis, unlike we've seen before. It's a serious moment, and it's a crisis on almost every single level. It's a cost of living crisis driven by the president's big, beautiful bill, which is historic cuts to social programs that make life more affordable for working families, healthcare, education, childcare, all been cut. It's a corruption crisis. The president has made nearly $1 billion so far this year while in office. He's picking winners and losers in every industry from the Oval Office. That's cronyism, it's not capitalism. And the worst part is, none of it has to be this way. There's good news, because we can do something about it. And Democrats have to win back the House in the 2026 midterm elections. History is watching this moment. And I'm running for office in my home, New York's 12th congressional district, where I was born and raised. I took the 79th Street bus to school every day as a kid from one side of this district to the other. And I care about this community. And they deserve a representative who will listen to them, who will understand their concerns, amplify their voice, and go to Washington and execute on their behalf.
What do you say to constituents, potential voters, who are more worried that you'll be more influencer than legislator?
Well, I'm not just, I think I'm the only content creator who has a law degree and a business degree from Harvard that I know of. So I've spent time in and around politics my whole life. I've worked on political campaigns. I've got a law degree and a business degree, and I've spent time studying policy, and so I really care about. And unlike a lot of influencers, my message is always political. It's a political action tool. And so I haven't cashed in, and I'm not doing this for any other reason than to speak out for the values of our party and what we stand for. And so as a citizen, my constituency was one, just myself. But as a congressperson, I would represent a district.
And I want to pivot and talk a little bit about the elephant in the country, which is your grandfather was obviously the president of the United States, and your family is one of the most storied political dynasties in American history. But Trump has been seemingly obsessed with dismantling your family's legacy. He's declassified previously classified Kennedy assassination records. He's paved over the Rose Garden, which your grandmother last renovated with her friend Bunny Mellon in 1961. He recently razed the Jacqueline Kennedy Garden with the demolition of the East Wing. He sought to MAGAfy the Kennedy Center, and he also even wants to repaint Air Force One so that it no longer has, as he's put it, a Jackie Kennedy color. What do you think Trump's trying to accomplish here, and does it make your decision to run for this seat that much more urgent?
My grandfather's legacy of service means a lot to me. He was the youngest person ever elected president. He sent a man to the moon. His White House drafted the Civil Rights Act, and I'm protective over that. And President Trump, and it's not just my family's legacy, it's generations of Americans and New Yorkers who fought and sacrificed to build this country. And he is dismantling that legacy. He's so obsessed with the Kennedys and the Kennedy name and the Kennedy brand that he caged one and put it in his cabinet, a rabid dog in his cabinet, put a collar on my cousin RFK Jr. and has him there barking, spreading lies and spreading misinformation.
You were the first member of your family to come out and criticize him publicly. What do you say to voters who now see the Kennedy name and associate it with your cousin's policies? I don't think there's anything anyone can do to change what JFK, my grandparents, my mom, my Uncle John stood for. Nobody's that powerful. But RFK Jr. is a dangerous person who has making life and death decisions as Secretary of Health and Human Services. And you don't just have to take my word for it. Now we have an actual record to go on. He has cut a quarter of the people who work in his agency. He fired all the vaccine experts on the panel and replaced them with anti-vaxxers. He's cutting funding for life-saving research, cancer patients, giving them their last hope. People should know, I mean, when he's not making infomercials for Steak and Shake and Coca-Cola, he's spreading misinformation and lies that are leading to deaths around the country. Measles outbreak, there's a measles outbreak in America right now, higher than it's been in 40 years as a direct result of what he has done. Do you think your cousin is profiting off of his position in the Trump administration?
This brings us back to the corruption crisis that we're in. I don't think it takes a genius to know that the Trump administration is the most corrupt in American history. And I don't know who's paying him, but I know that what he's saying isn't making anybody healthier or safer, and that the American people should know when he barks who's actually talking.
You are the first Jewish Kennedy. During a time of rising anti-Semitism, not just in this city, but across the country, what do you have to say to your constituents who are really worried? How are you going to keep them safe during this period of time?
Anti-Semitism is on the rise in America and around the world. And since October 7th, hate crimes against Jews have more than doubled. This is a serious situation, and this community has been, and New York City has been, for centuries, a safe haven for Jews. That's why my own relatives came here, and why they were able to succeed here. And Jewish people in this city and around the country feel scared. And we should also, there's actions that we can take. For example, the Nonprofit Security Grant Program at the federal level is a federal program that provides funds to safeguard our shuls, synagogues, temples, and also, by the way, mosques.
Right now in Washington, the Senate passed a bill to end the shutdown after a 40-day impasse. It reopens the government. There were a handful of Senate Democrats, not without criticism, who ultimately supported this deal. It's going to reverse some of the pain that Trump inflicted, but obviously there's been a lot of backlash so far. Are you opposed to Democrats making this deal, and do you think that Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is up to the task to continue to lead this cohort of Democrats?
Well, President Trump is to blame for this shutdown. He's in control of all three branches of government, and the blame rests directly on him. And we just have to look at what he did during the shutdown. He had a Great Gatsby-themed party at Mar-a-Lago. He knocked down half of the White House to build a ballroom, and he went golfing. And the American people understand who's actually to blame. And the voters last week showed that they blame the Republican Party for this shutdown. And the message that I got from last week's election was that it's not the time to cave.
You're a lawyer, as you noted. Trump's retribution plan at the DOJ is one of the most dramatic things we've seen done to American institutions in modern history. How alarmed by you on this? And from a service perspective, if you were elected to be a member of Congress, what would you do to ensure that something like this doesn't happen again?
Well, this brings us to the constitutional crisis that we're in. The president is using not just the bully pulpit, but also the actual levers of power, his Department of Justice, to silence his critics, to exact revenge from universities, to punish law firms, and anyone who's willing to stand up against him. And there's a lot that we can do at the federal level. One thing we can do is elect candidates who know how to communicate and fight back in this toxic political environment that we find ourselves in. New media is completely polluted and the air is dirty. But I have figured out a way to breathe in that environment, and we need to elect candidates who understand how to do that. And I think that's what would make me an effective representative. But beyond that, Democrats need to win back the House, because with control of the House, we have control of the Judiciary Committee. The Judiciary Committee has the power to subpoena and to investigate. And that's the only way that we're going to get real answers to the questions of what the president is doing and do something to stop him from doing it in the future.
And I know you had mentioned a few things about oversight with regards to RFK Jr., but was there anything else you wanted to elaborate on in terms of the specific policies that he's already implemented that you would care to investigate if you became a member?
Well, we know that when he was campaigning for president, before that, he was spreading vaccine misinformation while he's being paid by anti-vax groups. And so one thing that I would want to do is tell my cousin, RFK Jr., when Democrats win the majority and when we control the Judiciary Committee, to come up to Capitol Hill and sit and answer questions.
We're almost out of time, but light question for you. Do you think Trump is a fascist?
I don't think that term is actually very helpful. I think Trump is Trump and MAGA is MAGA, and it's a completely new movement, and that they control a propaganda machine bigger than anything humanity has ever seen. He not only controls his own social media platform, which he uses to issue official White House communications, but he is in bed with the leaders of every other platform out there, Elon Musk, Zuckerberg. All of them are working together to spread to promote their own agenda. And so fascism, I think, is a catchy term, or it feels good to call somebody something so extreme, but I think this is completely new and an unprecedented threat, and we need to respond to it with new, creative ways of fighting back.
So you don't see any historical analogs here?
Well, of course there are. I mean, the same strongmen do the same thing over and over throughout history. But I think I think President Trump represents a threat unlike any other.
There's more to come from my interview with Jack. I asked him who his political inspiration is. His answer was pretty interesting. And remember, if you've got a question or comment for us at home, check us out on Blue Sky or Instagram and drop us a line. Our producers will surprise us with them later on in the show. They love to torture us. Our new handle everywhere is at The Weekend MS Now. Find us. And we're back with more from my conversation with John F. Kennedy's grandson, Jack Schlossberg, on his decision to run for Congress. When you look at politics past and present, who is your political inspiration?
Well, my grandfather certainly inspires me. President Kennedy gave his life in service to his country. He was a soldier, a congressman, a senator, and a president. But in the modern era, I love Nancy Pelosi. She's the most important female political figure in American history. And she has been the backbone of the Democratic Party. She's the reason that we have the Affordable Care Act and so many other, she's championed so many other progressive causes. And she deserves a lot of credit for the example she set and her leadership of our party. In addition, Pope Leo.
Another very active social media influencer.
Right, exactly. Can't get more influential than
Fantastic,
Great
Jackie.
interview.
Really
Thanks, guys.
terrific interview.
Very good.
It was fun to get a on-the-ground look at the energy of the next generation of the Democratic Party and to understand what that means beyond just the catchphrase of the next generation, but what this next generation actually wants to do.
And you keep hearing folks say, we need a new generation of leadership. We need a new generation of leadership. It's nice to actually see, we're starting to actually see that happen, right? You can't just, you can be on the sidelines and do it as an activist or whatever and push the party, but going inside the system and trying to shake it up is interesting. NY12 is going to be a very interesting race. I want to throw up this full screen of these candidates who have officially jumped in the race. We're told that there might be some others coming next week. Just pay attention to the internet, y'all. We have state reps. We have a former journalist. Lots of folks who are popping in.
Current city council member.
Current city councilman. So there are quite a few people who are jumping in, which I'm kind of surprised by. Like, I feel like when the older, big wigs of the party leave, they kind of make clear who they want. It seems like now they're just kind of walked out and was like, good luck. Go ahead, fight it out, kids.
Well, and Jerry Nadler has said, Michael Lasher is actually his protege, and he has said that he is not going to endorse till further down the line here. But this is a very coveted seat. I mean, who doesn't want to represent the heart of Manhattan? Where there's
Congress
so
sounds
much
terrible.
action
Sounds terrible.
But you know what, though? I think this is going to be an exciting primary because we're so used to your point, people leave Congress and then they designate someone or their offspring runs in the seat. No shade to those folks who got to Congress that way. They still had to go out and ask people for their votes. Here, it's going to be a crowded field, and folks are really going to have to get out there and ask for people's votes.
And this broader story about who controls the legacy and the story of Camelot and the Kennedy family, it's
not going anywhere. Not going anywhere. But we are, because we have another jam-packed hour ahead. MS Now's very own Jen Psaki will join the table to discuss Trump's flailing on the economy. Plus, we'll talk to House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries about what's next for Democrats after the brutal 43-day government shutdown. You're watching The Weekend only on MS Now.